We are very quick to see something that is art that isn't about sex, and because it involves the naked body, be very quick to sexualize it.
It's a way to make nudity accessible. I want to use the body with the idea of making it sexual or making it specific to that person. It's not about us participating in the art. It's greater than us. It's about society. It's about what humankind can achieve, reimagining those connections.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less. Less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. I don't always introduce myself like that, but today I just feel a bit of a vibe. The sun's shining outside, and the chance of it shining where you are right now could be high depending where you are in the world. And actually, I thought since I'm on the world, I'd like to say hello to my US listeners, because I know there's a lot of you tuning in from the US. Hope you're wonderful. Today, I have a really special episode for you, and something different from maybe the usual. Is that this wonderful artist, photographer, graphic designer. I'm not a art critic, but I appreciate art in many ways. Photography, in particular. When I spent 2 years traveling around the world, I took a lot of photos. So I have Omer with me today, Omer Gaash, to talk about his art, and he uses a lot of nudity in his work, and it's something I really love because it's so beautifully brought together and very thought provoking. And we really talk about the naked body, his work, his inspiration, sexuality, masculinity, so many different things, right? And making nudity more accessible. And he talks a lot about his inspiration, and actually one of the things I think was really striking from the conversation was how transformative it is for his models to be in conjunction and working with him. That's something that really kind of jumped out to me. And we talked a lot about his background and, what's kind of brought him to this work and so forth. And yeah, we have a wonderful conversation. I really love this conversation because I think art has a power to really shift our minds in the way that you can go to a workshop, you can go to a tantra workshop, and you can go to a dating workshop, you go to a workshop around your beliefs and so forth. And there's a way in which they can shift our worldview, our point of view about ourselves and how we see the world and how we see ourselves. But a piece of art can do the same to you, or a exhibition of art can do the same to you. You can look at some images and think, wow, shit, that really makes me look at myself differently, or what I thought about X or what I thought about Y. So this episode is wonderful. And I almost forgot that it talks about what it's like to shoot in public places in London in particularly, and how different it is from other countries. So I'm really looking forward to this episode, and I hope you're looking forward to it as well. Without further ado, I'll let you just jump into it because, you can tell I'm feeling quite excited about this episode and what you're going to take away from it. So I have a wonderful guest with me today, someone who I have followed for a little while on Instagram and been just absolutely loving his work. I wouldn't class myself as an amateur photographer anymore. I did a lot of photography many years ago, but I can still take in and appreciate what I see because I think sometimes photography can feel quite boring and just like very regular, people, portraits and things like that, especially in the medium of Instagram. But I come across today's guest's work, I think through someone called the Sex Doctor, actually. I think she was sharing some of his work on her page. And I was like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. I think I sat and looked at one particular picture for probably 3 or 4 minutes and just looking at the intertwining bodies and people, and was just like in awe of just the organization, the structure, and just the creativity to bring the idea together. So today we have with me, oh my gosh, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure to have you. And I always like to start off with my guests. I always think it's a very interesting question to lead people to, for our guests to understand is like, what was your journey to do the work that you do today in terms of photography and what you create?
Yeah, that's it's always a good question, I think, because none of us starts from the same point as artists. And for me, growing up in a small town next to the beach, 10 minutes walk, allowed me to spend a lot of time on my own. And there was a group of same age group, friends of mine, that we used to spend a lot of time together, including going to the beach and hanging out in town. And that slow-paced kind of connection made me, I feel, that person that I am today. I really like to take my time and have a conversation with people and keep those connections through all these years in all the places that I used to live in. And also during that time, I felt like I had something within me that I was looking to appreciate or acknowledge or approve by myself, not from the outside world. So I used to take a lot of walks by myself in nature, and at some point taking my parents' camera and take pictures of myself. So it was a very healing process, or checking who I am. And at some point, it just became a tool that I'm using. And I realized that I like more the frame, the lighting, the pose, the journey to go to the location. And at the beginning, it was just me as a subject. I got bored. So I asked my friends to model for me because I felt safer with them. And it just became a thing that I do. And I think my style of creating those art with bodies in nature only became more defined in the last maybe 8 years, after a lot of things that I've studied before that. And only looking back now, I know I can say, oh, this is why I'm doing this is why I'm going there, this is why I'm comfortable with those kind of frames. And that's have something to do with me studying ballroom dancing. And in the army, I was in intelligence, and I was dealing with aerial photos, maps. And that kind of technology for me is really why I'm calling it mapping environments with the human body, because it's all about the relationship of man-made and nature. And for me, growing up in nature, but dealing with those maps, but also dancing. So I'm using my body to express how I connect to my environment. These are all combined together.
Beautiful. And as you say it, I can see it, because, the dancing, the ballroom dancing, and I did read before you were in the dancing world, and it's the way in which you're able to use bodies that are both strong but gentle in spaces that are almost sometimes quite harsh, sometimes very gentle, in this beautiful fusion of the two. And I feel like normally we see it's like man versus land. We can feel that in our world that we live in, as the way that as human beings we are conquering much of Mother Nature. But through your work, there is this kind of symbiotic experience that the viewer experiences through viewing so much of your art.
Yes, exactly. One of the themes, because looking back, I realized I have 3 themes, or four nowadays, that I'm working with, which is body terrain and symbiotic bodies, that I call it, because I'm working in the studio. I'm trying to find new connections that the body can create with himself, but also with the other. And I have body in architecture. I studied architecture, and for me, the connection to man-made objects like handrails and concrete bare walls, any place that can be very mundane that we might ignore on the daily basis, but I want to stop and look at it and find the magic in those places. So I think by placing bodies like that, I can make people rethink how they see the space around them. And the last theme for me is the new textures that I'm creating, patterns from bodies. So yes, it's all about the connection between what we have and our surrounding.
Incredible. And you said there about the new textures, because I think of nature has lots of reoccurring patterns. If we look at a snowflake or water, it's just reoccurring patterns. And you kind of, what's the idea you're creating with using the human body as a kind of as in multiple patterns in your work?
It comes from several places for me, creating those patterns. First of all, I'm a graphic designer by training. I did my BA in visual communication, and I'm working as a freelance graphic designer for over 16 years. I have clients in different places and in different fields. And taking that, I think my style as a designer is to work with big shapes. And I was trying to find a way to take my knowledge and put that in my art. And that combination of, I want to use bodies, but I want to use big shapes. Maybe I can use bodies as shapes and create those patterns. But then thinking about what I've just made, for me, it's a way to make nudity accessible in public spaces, because when you look at those patterns from afar, they look like shapes. But the closer you get to it, you understand this is a body, which is also a way for me to eliminate the idea of judging the other, because you can't really see the skin tone. You can't see that's the shape of what type of body is it, the heritage. You just see a shape. You enjoy the aesthetic of the body. And those new textures for me was something I can maybe go back and recreate patterns that are inspired by different cultural patterns, like you have in Far East or in America, or I don't know, here in Europe somewhere, or also just like basic shapes that we can create that are not related to any specific culture. Just enjoy the aesthetic of it. So yeah, these are a few of the messages I can think about when creating those patterns.
So it's hearing it's like you're zooming us out from the body as a thing that we, because as people, as society, we can be so, especially for our own bodies. And I'm thinking of, I have a friend of mine who's a body confidence photographer, and he talks. I actually saw him last night. We had dinner, and we were talking about our habit of looking at bodies as like body parts, as like, oh, I like that and I don't like this, and this looks good and I want to change that. It sounds like through this work is you want to like zoom us out of the body as the like a bits of parts and look at it as like a greater whole of interconnected bodies as the shape itself, not as the individual bodies to critique and, as you said, judge.
Yes, exactly. And I think also one of the layers of that creation is for me to eliminate the idea of the individual, as you say, because it's not about one person. It's not about us participating in the art. It's greater than us. It's about society. It's about what humankind can achieve, reimagining those connections, because sometimes with the patterns, I compose different sessions I had with different models that never met, but they are together in that pattern. So it's a made up reality in a way, in a non-existent space even. So it's just for the sake of creation, and even in my photos that are not the patterns, when I'm taking pictures in nature, I'm trying to avoid faces or even private parts. I feel like I want to use the body without the idea of making it sexual or making it specific to that person. I think I wanted to make it timeless and in person, but talk about society in that way and talk about a place through that connection.
Got it. And as so much you said there, I want to dive into. But you talked about making nudity accessible to people because, you know, as you know, we're in the UK and the British are very prude about the naked body. You know, it's okay if you're in a nudist beach and we don't want to talk about people in nudist beaches and go nudist holidays. But, you know, you're bringing nudity into public spaces. Like, you know, I think it's Prime Meridian that you have in a London. I'm not sure what London Park it is, but I know from the signs and what it looks like, you're bringing these nude bodies into public spaces. I guess I wonder is actually what I'm really interested in is what's the reaction you receive as you're shooting from the, you know, the general public?
I had a very cute photo shoot in Greenwich Park, where the observatory, sorry. And we had people, I thought I'm bringing two models, 6 a.m., you know, just like first ray of light, and nobody's going to be around. But there's so many people here that like to go out very early. So we had a few viewers next to us, but they were quite respectful. They didn't try to stop us or call someone to stop us on their behalf. They just were quite shocked. I think some of them took pictures of us making the shoot. But I think in general, people are a bit more shy to intervene and to try to stop here. What I discovered in the UK that if you have a permit for something, it's legit and nobody will stop you. Even more so if you don't have a permit for nudity, if it's not with the intention of disrupting the public, then it's okay, especially if it's for art. So obviously depends where, like if you'll go to City of London, that will be a problem. But anywhere else, I find in and out, like quick snapshots is acceptable to here. And yes, it really depends on the context, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't want to get arrested. I know photographers in New York in the 90s, 80s got arrested multiple times, like Spencer Tunick, which I love, and also participated in his shoots before. But I'm trying to make it as less as in your face or provocative as possible.
Yeah, and I have this vision of you shooting in like the City of London and like the Barbican, you know, because some of those buildings there would be so stunning as
which I had.
can see. Oh yeah,
I was a student. My MA was in Goldsmith in London. I just moved here during lockdown, and during my studies, I decided to explore the Barbican. I love brutalistic architecture. Studying architecture for me, this is something romantic about it, even if it's very cold and distance. So I got 8 models to come with me, 7 a.m. one Saturday, and they were very dedicated to the cause. And I didn't want to cause any problems. And I thought me as an art student will help me to get access to those spaces. And I didn't realize you need a permit back then. So I got them to walk with me into the Barbican. We had a few photos. We had 2 videos, and then I think one of the residents just complained to the guards. So a guard approached me saying, "Do you have a permit?" And I said, "I'm an art student. I didn't know I need a permit. We can just go away." But by then, I already had the photos. I had the video. I had the 8 models that felt like I know what I'm doing, and they felt safe. So we wrapped it up and went out. But in any other scenario, it could have ended like by me, I don't know, been taking my camera away from me or my memory card or me being getting a fine. It is a risk, but I feel like it's worth it.
Yeah. And as you said, there's an intention for you to do it all respectfully. Yeah. In a way that like respects both the surroundings, the models, and the people who happen to kind of come around, because like you said, there's and you can see it through your images, there's a real desire to remove the sexuality from the images, from the shoots, which I think you do so beautifully. Because as humans, as people, and I'm going to go back to the British because, you know, I was born and raised here, is we do have a real problem with sexuality as well. Just any expression of sexuality. We are very quick to see something that is art that isn't about sex, and because it involves the naked body, be very quick to sexualize it.
Yes, I feel like English culture is you feel how you've been told to feel, and then you're okay with it. So if it's a sexual space, you're entering a space where you know where you're going into, you're going to be okay with that. If it's a loud space, if it's a quiet space, I don't know, anything that you know what to expect, then it's okay with how people interact here. But they need to be told in advance. And I've learned that sometimes in a hard way, like getting the no, or getting a negative feedback, like of being confused. I'm always upfront with what I want to do with people and where I'm going to take them and what's the style going to be like, especially with my portfolio. When you see my social media and my website, you know what to expect. There's no surprises there. But it is important, and I realize that people need to know, and it's just making sense that you'll tell them what's happening before you're actually doing it.
People love certainty.
Yes. I like the game. I like the idea of making a frame around my art, saying this is my DNA as an artist. I have a few ideas, but also I'm very dependent on my models, basically, because I'm working with dancers or people that know how to work with their body. And sometimes maybe I danced a bit, like ballroom dancing, but this is not my profession. This is not what I do for a living. So it's sometimes I want them to surprise me. I want them to come up with ideas. I want them to understand my DNA as an artist and then extend from there. And that's, I think, where the magic happens, because I think good work, not just art, is about communication and about understanding each other and then going towards the same goal, even like a mutual goal for a few minutes. Then you get the best parts of everything.
It's like a beautiful teamwork. You bring your essence and your magic, and they bring their essence and their magic, and you create a space where your magic can interweave with theirs, and then you really just capture what is created from there.
Yes, exactly. And it's magic, and it's unpredictable, and that's what keeps me going, because I always find new things that I didn't expect.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. What was it that inspired you to use the human body as your kind of, it's almost like the human body is your paint?
I think photography is a medium. It's just a mean to an end. It's not something that I always used. I was painting, I was dancing. I always used my body. Even architecture studies were something I used to create buildings around art institutions. Branding for me was around cultural institutions, branding dance companies, galleries, and all these projects were around communities or around people in the end. So using bodies in my art is just one more tool that I'm using. And I think it goes back to how I see myself, because I like being naked. I like who I am and what I've been given in this cycle of life. And I can't just be in all the photos. And I feel like I express who I am through other people's bodies.
And you still use yourself in much of your photos as well?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I'm flying to Spain at the beginning of May to document a retreat. It's called Bonobo Experience. And I'm going to be in a beautiful valley next to Granada city and away from any civilization. I think 4 hours away. I'm going to have time for myself, and I want to go on those hikes by myself and create my art. I'm going to use my body. So yes, until today, I'm still popping in and out from frames when I can, if I need to. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I do hope at some point that creating my art, it will lead to collaborations with other companies that will be on the bridge between art project and a commercial project.
What would you love to create out of such a collaboration?
Creating branding for companies like art centers and dance companies. I completely see myself as an artist that creates the visuals for those companies for the next season. I would dare say the Royal Ballet in London and the Royal Opera House, and those companies use the dancers and the actors to create the next season campaign. And I have a vision, and I feel like it would be beautiful to maybe collaborate on that.
Bring more of the dancers' bodies into the more public-facing kind of campaigns, art marketing.
Yes, last Fashion Week was in February, and I had a photo shoot in Piccadilly Square in collaboration with a fashion designer. When we brought six or five models. They were wearing his clothes, and they were in the middle of the square, and I had an audience of I don't know how many, 200, 300 people behind me because it's Fashion Week, and it's a very public space. But we took on that space and made it our own, and I found myself surrounded with all these people taking photos of me directing those 5-6 models in the middle of Piccadilly Square. So I had a list of ideas of what I want to do with them, but I had to think quick. I didn't have really time to look at the brief myself. So in the moment of truth, I had to just keep it going, So from one pose to the other, while they're doing the pose and I'm taking the picture, I'm already thinking about the next frame and how to direct them. And I want to make it interesting for me, and I want to make it interesting for them, but also have good frames for my client. So it was a big mix of all the components that I usually do in a very private way, because when I'm creating, I prefer not to have people watching me. Even in my studio, I don't have assistants. I'm just doing it on my own. But that was a big change.
How did it feel to have an audience watching you work?
It felt like I'm performing myself. The way you hold the camera, the way you talk to your models, the way you take the space as a photographer, so your whole presence, because people are looking up to you. You're directing, you're in charge of that moment. People put their safety in you, they're listening to what you're going to say. I like that high pressure environment. I used to work in a very high pressure environment in the studio as a designer, and in the army, in the intelligence force, in the office. And I'm okay with that as a designer, as a freelancer myself. Nowadays, I have few clients at the same time, and I was always okay with that. I know how to get my hands off the keyboard at some point. So it's the same with that kind of moment when you have all these expectations from people. You just go for it. In the end, it's just a frame. They're wearing clothes. You remember the basic of things. It's a click on a camera. What can possibly go wrong? Like, even if it's a really shitty frame, in the end, someone must love it somewhere. And it's okay to say it's a flop. It didn't work, and we're moving on. And it's also good. Like, I've learned a lot from making my mistakes. I'm not hiding them. I think we grow when we make mistakes.
Yeah, we have a difficult relationship with making mistakes. It's interesting. Most of my work I do is with men in the realms of like relationships and dating and intimacy. And one of the most common things that comes up for the guys I work with is this fear, actually, of making mistakes. Like, if I make a mistake in the bedroom, what will my partner think if I make a mistake on this date? But you see mistakes very differently there. How did you come to that way of viewing your mistakes? Like, imagine there's an evolution through your years.
I think I grew up in small places, which really helped. Then judgment wasn't really about what you do. Maybe we laughed about, like, teasing each other about some stuff, like, you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too fat. But it was a joke. It wasn't for real, like we were still very good mates. And it allowed me to explore what I want to do. I had a lot of alone time with my friends or by myself. And when I asked my neighbor if he wants to join me for a shoot, he just said yes. And he had no idea what I'm going to do. And I had no idea how I'm going to do it. That magical moment of uncertainty, but no judgment, no clients, just creating and see what we like about it, even if it's not what we were hoping to get, but we can choose what we liked out of that outcome. I had a photo shoot. I was trying to create something like Pierre and Gilles, those two photographers that have kitsch style photography. They create everything from the set design, they airbrush their models, so almost no Photoshop after. Great photos, always very accurate. They look like a postcard. So I was trying to recreate one of their photos and it looked horrible. But just the idea of experimenting with bringing my friend, getting naked in the middle of a forest and getting my shitty light and, like really ratchet camera, everything was really bad. But the fact that I allowed myself to be in that moment and try that frame, and I realized what I do like about it. I do like to work with people that I like to spend time with, and I do want to explore light, and I do want to go out into nature more. So I think people that hold themselves back, it just will take them longer to learn about who they are.
Yeah. And I kind of hear there that what you took away from your kind of like quote unquote mistakes created confidence and self-learning and self-understanding of your desires, your passions, your path that you want to be taking. And I also see as a lack of what you didn't do is create meaning. One of the common things that we do, if we make a mistake and we go, oh, I made a mistake, that means that I am da-da-da, and as an artist, I imagine that could be quite easy, especially with the way that there's so much critique and criticism that exists.
Yes, the less we judge ourselves. I do like to have expectations, it's it gets you up in the morning. Get the bed clean, tidy the room, make morning coffee, have that routine and expect for great things to happen. You need to do the work, but I think mistakes are crucial. We all need to have them.
Yeah, definitely. And you, as I mentioned before, you use a lot of male bodies in your work. And is this a very deliberate choice from yourself?
Well, I think I felt comfortable dealing with male nudity because I'm gay and I'm more familiar with the male body. I do work with women. I work with trans, any spectrum of our society, basically. It's just about me being able to respect who I'm working with and also getting the best results from the tools that I have. So it started with working with men, but I do want to work with everybody. I don't want to hold myself. It's just my go-to because, again, it's more familiar for me.
It's a familiar brush.
Yes. And I also think growing up in Israel, we have a diverse community because everybody came from anywhere in the globe to that land, but it's not as diverse as we have in the UK. And moving here, for me, it was a very joyful experience, to be able to meet people from all around the world and different cultures and different backgrounds and different body types and different state of mind even, just that openness. And as I said before, like you've been told to think like this is how you should feel at this moment when people say yes to you for a photo shoot, they just make a switch in their head and they are willing to do whatever it takes for that frame, which is amazing. So I do have a broader spectrum of people now in my portfolio, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. And I guess inherently when you're using male bodies, you start to intermingle and question our ideas around masculinity and how those are expressed. And again, is that also a kind of deliberate piece for you around questioning how we view male bodies and the masculinity that sits behind or within all of our psyches?
I think it's a process. When someone's coming to model for my art, he's going through that different stages of understanding what we're doing and how he presents himself to my camera. Some people, guys, will come very sure of themselves and they want to make sure that they're at their best. So they will wait a few months before coming for the shoot because they want to lose weight, they want to go to the gym more, they want to keep healthy, less drinking, and prepare for the shoot. And for me, this is not the point. Like, I don't need you at your best. Like, obviously, I want you to have good energy on the day, but it's not about being at your top shape in that way, because the way I'm directing people is not about their muscles necessarily, or masculinity even, without the muscles. And you can see when they're stripping off their clothes at the beginning, they're very alert. They're trying to keep their pose very, with that volume, with that aura of masculinity. And the more they work and they realize that it's not about that, something, they shed another layer, which is beautiful. They just relax. They just give themselves to the process. They stop trying to pose like machos. And even for me, I really care about the way you hold your leg or your hand, if it's a very gentle touch, you know, those Renaissance paintings, and you have a point in your leg from ballet. And guys that don't used to dance or don't used to have their body hold like this, they need to go through that process of, oh, I have fingers. I need to think what I'm doing with my fingers when I'm posing. So it's not that easy. It's very physical and it's very tiring. And there's a lot to think simultaneously. Also scared of someone maybe passing by because it's in a public space or in nature. So they forget they're naked. They forget they're taking their guards down at some point. And this is where the creation starts. And it's beautiful.
And it sounds like a real transformational experience for the models as well, to, as you say, to like shed a layer of it. Almost is this performative nature that we have of like, oh, I need to do this for the camera. And it sounds like as through the process, for the day, through the morning, there's a kind of surrendering into the process, a softening of I'm not here to perform. I'm just here to, it sounds like, and you tell me if this sounds quite right, I'm here to be me.
Yes, I'm not claiming to be a therapist, or I don't have psychology training in me, but I do see how people change over time during the session. Opening up, softening, as you say. Yes, just connecting. Maybe reconnecting to themselves, I might say, or just to my way of living or way of seeing the world or my creation. I don't walk around naked in the street, but yeah, just make that a bit more approachable, less of a guard around you.
And I imagine you would feel that this would be a wonderful way that not just those models, but as general, as people, as men, that we could bring more of that unguardedness, surrender, softness into our kind of daily lives, with for the kind of to create more connection, not just with ourselves, but also the others that we come across.
Yes, I had a wonderful photo shoot just a couple of months before moving to the UK, and that was almost 4 years ago. I went down to the Dead Sea with 17 models and a photographer who helped me to take all the behind the scenes. And as Israelis, we are very protected. We are very private. We don't like to be naked around other people. We're very judgy. We are very warm, but when it comes to nudity, it just plays differently. When you have all those places here in the UK about like naked beaches or saunas or sex parties, people know those spaces and respect those rules and respect people, and you almost don't feel any judgment at all. You can just be who you are. But in Israel, it's a bit different in that sense. I think we need to evolve in that way. But after 10 years working in Israel as an artist, I invited a few of my models to create that session with me at the Dead Sea. And it was wonderful to see them stripping off their clothes because we spent the whole day naked from morning till night. We had a bonfire at the end. And you can see them at the end of the day, just sitting down naked, chatting, laughing, eating, drinking, just enjoying themselves. And some of them became really good friends from that day. And it's a process. Yes, not everybody, I think, can or want to do that. It's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be. I'm not advocating for nudity, or it's not about that.
And how does when you observe this shift in people through working with them, how does that kind of impact upon you?
I like to create my own reality and create my own space, and seeing people feeling that comfortable being naked, I don't know how to say it. I'm just happy that people understand my vibe, understand my vision, and come for a few moments into my reality.
Just like the aura you generate and you create is able to then shift the people who come into your sphere of kind of influence or energy. And there's a kind of feedback of like joy of seeing that transformation, that evolution.
Yes, and it's very different from just taking pictures of people like a portrait, and then the session ends and the client goes and the photographer stays in his studio editing the photos, and that's where the relationship ends. And for me, because I'm working with smaller crowd at the moment, don't have big projects, I maintain those connections, and it's very personal. If I know what the person in front of me can do, I know what to ask him. It's like an architect that will ask the person who's doing the statistic for the building, where the columns will be, how much weight it can take. If I know in advance what to ask from the person in front of me, I think we can get a better creation and a better experience for them as well.
Beautiful. You mentioned like nudist beaches and nudist spaces, and I follow a sex therapist in the United States, and I think his name is Justin or Julian. I can't quite remember. I can picture his face right in front of me. And he showed some research actually that showed that people that spend time in these sorts of spaces, like nudist beaches, which I'm a massive fan of, sex parties, which I'm also a fan of, actually report higher levels of body confidence. Not because they have it when they enter these spaces, but by seeing and being around other naked bodies, it makes them more comfortable with their own body. I imagine you've also seen this effect with your own eyes.
Yes, if it's more than one person, of course, it affects the way they behave, because the chemistry is very important. I feel like when I'm going out to nature and I spend a few good amount of hours with one person or a few, I want to have that connection, I want to feel good about myself. I want to make them feel good in just by being present, nothing else. And I can see when they have a connection, it's 2 or 3 models, it really helps for the frame, because in the end, it's very physical. You either need to climb on a tree or put your body on a rocky terrain. And sometimes it also evolves with touching the other model. Very physical. So I want them to feel comfortable. And if they don't enjoy the touch, if they don't understand the logic behind it, it just almost, you can see it in the frame. And I don't want that to happen. So yes, it is body positivity, and it is helping each other empower what we have. In a non-verbal way, even sometimes, just by being present, just sending that good aura that we have, as you say. It's enough.
And it's interesting you talk about touch there, because I was at a men's retreat last year, and one of the exercises they asked us to do was to massage each other. Everyone was fully clothed because we were in the middle of the desert and it was freezing. And we were like in groups of 4. And it was really interesting afterwards. We kind of did a debrief, and many of the men talked about their uncomfortability in touching another man in a way that was massage. And they noticed that their own mind was almost struggling with the concept of like, oh, I'm massaging this man. It's non-sexual, but I've massaged women or other men before and it's been sexual, and they're kind of having to like be in this space of like, oh, this, I don't need to bring this sexual piece into this. And it's really beautiful. I use that as an example because often as men, we have this difficulty, straight men have this difficulty with touching and being physical with other men. Is this something you kind of touched upon it before, but is it something you see also with the models that you work with?
It depends with their sexual orientation or experience with being naked in spaces. I started working with people that were my friends, but later on, when I expanded my circles, it was my queer community. And gay men, I think there's something about them. We're always dealing with how we look, who's looking at us. It's always on our minds, I think. So shifting into art that has nudity, it's maybe not as an issue, maybe as for straight people. I don't want to generalize. Obviously, it depends on your lifestyle. But it is something that I see I'm very cautious about, aging, how my body looks, how my body reacts to different situations, different touch. And I think when creating, it's also the same with, from what I'm seeing, it's easier for maybe gay men to come and have a physical touch when creating something. And they know who they're going to create with in advance. I think sometimes going into those sex spaces, you're not necessarily sure who's going to be in that group. And that can come off as a surprise. It's also a learning curve to accept changes and things that are not in control. This is not a dating app. It's just a workshop. So as you say, it's a non-sexual touch, but I think any touch is something that is a bond, is a way of communication, even if it's non-sexual. And it's okay to say no. No is sexy. Know your boundaries. Or sometimes I think in workshops you have that scale between 1 and 10. When you come to a workshop, when you said yes one time, it doesn't mean that necessarily the next time will be the same yes, because we always wake up in a different way of connecting to ourselves. And having that scale, how much do you want to be touched by that specific person you've been pairing up with, is a great way of expressing if you're liking him or not. And by protecting yourself, not trying to insult the other. And I also do the same, not with a scale from 1 to 10, but I'm asking my models, even though they know who they're going to be working with, if it's okay for them to hold hands or to sit on each other's back. Or before directing them, I'm asking them, is it okay if he's going to be doing this and that? And if they say yes, then it's okay, because it's been said out loud. Consent, even when photography, is super important.
Well, that's beautiful to hear, because I had never really thought about it. I imagine that you've asked people to be in the shoot, or you've employed people to be in the shoot, and it's a kind of like, oh, we follow the director. I'm a model. I do what I'm told. They don't. It wouldn't necessarily be the assumption of maybe the viewer that they have so much agency within the shoot about what's okay for them and what's not okay for them.
Yeah, sure. Consent is important. I think as a photographer, as a director, you have a lot of power, which you need to be careful with. Any instructor, when you have workshops, and someone who's practicing being a guide, especially for touch, sexual spaces, and nude photography, it's all about communication and expectations. And yes.
And I wanted to touch on your, I think as you call it, symbiotic images. Because there's this, I think these are probably the ones that fascinate me the most. Because you're almost looking for like, where does that limb start? Whose hand is that? And there's this this beautiful kind of level of, and I wonder, this is kind of a question, is like, is this your intention? Is like, there's so many layers of kind of almost support and brotherhood and like gentleness. Sometimes there's actually like really this strength in holding someone up to something. There's so much that is translated through those images. What is the intention for you to kind of bring to the viewer through those?
The frames where you have multiple hands wrapping up another person, I'm calling that series Forced and Bound. And it started off with a colleague of mine, good friend from New York, Mati Gelman, and we experimented in my studio back then near Tel Aviv, and we came up with those ways of holding each other from the back and from the front. And then I had another friend visiting from, I think he came from America, maybe LA, and we did the same in my studio, and it became a thing. And for me, that series represents either, as you say, empowering each other, but also sometimes we have people holding us back and trying to release those bounds. It's a game between that helps us to evolve and those holding us back. And it's all within the limitations of our body. If you can see, you might have a few hands, but I'm not stretching the arms. I'm not trying to do something that is beyond our physicality. Try to keep it real, but also a little bit surreal.
Yeah, it definitely comes across this surrealness of all the limbs, and as you said, there's one image that pops into my head. I can't think of the name, where it's almost this very subtle way in the way the arms are holding the man. Even I think it's covering his eyes. It just felt like, and you tell me again what your intention here is, almost like society. The way in which we so often we can feel that society is trying to hold us down, but very subtly and almost quite gently holding us back from maybe moving forward or creating what we love or what have you.
Yeah, it's a pose that allows us to move. You can move within that pose, but it has restrictions, and it is people holding us back. Yes, it's society holding us back. It's religion, it's borders, it's society's norms, anything that hold us from fully express ourselves. But also, it's a very capitalistic world, so we need to make money. Like our daily routine or weekly tasks are always around our health, our financials, our relationships, what we define for us as a success. And all these systems needs to correlate, needs to work together. And within that, you also want to feel a little bit of that freedom, that's for your soul. So that's, I think, maybe represent that kind of game in life.
Yeah, the game of the capitalist world is where we're trying to actualize ourselves, but there's the parts of us that hold ourselves back, and there's the parts of those around us that hold us back, and the greater society as well. Oh, I love that. I love those images.
I mean, keep your head in the game, but also go wild and explore.
And you mentioned, society and societal norms, and, religion, all these things. And kind of brings you back to the body, the nude body, and our troubled relationship. Why do you feel that we have such a kind of troubled relationship with the body, with the human body, and being with it, and being present and accepting of?
What you see online, what you see in magazines, what you see from your friends around you. We've been given what we've been given, right? That's the body we have. now you need to deal with it. But then you compare yourself, and then you expect those changes to come, sometimes unrealistically over a short time, if you want to change. I don't know. It's really hard for me to say. It feels almost not my place. I've been maybe blessed. I'm white, male, cis, gay, slim, tall. I'm not very interesting. I don't have a lot of struggles in that way. I don't know if it's not the norm. It's not what we need to aim for. I just feel like it was never an issue for me to deal with around work, environment, or friendships, environment, or around my family. Maybe I'm not the best person to talk about and struggle around body. I didn't like to be seen naked with my family when I was at my grandmother's place for a weekend when I was a child. I refused to go to the shower because I knew there was no lock on the door, and I didn't want her to see me. We laugh about it till today, but I think maybe I've gone through this process of understanding where I like to be naked, but it's not next to my family. But it's not because I don't like how I look. It's just because it depends on the context, I guess.
Yeah. The context of family. I think for many of us, it's funny. My partner, she's Swedish, and the first time I went to visit her, the second time I went to visit her family, we all ended up in the sauna with her family, her mum, her sister, and I had this big dilemma of like, okay, are you guys going to be? I was like to her, are you guys going to be wearing clothes or not wearing clothes? Because they're Swedish, they're pretty chill about these things. And she's like, everybody's going to be wearing a swimsuit apart from my dad. I was like, so does that mean I have to wear a swimsuit, or do I not wear a swimsuit? And she's like, no, that's up to you. I'm like, okay, how do I play this in this moment? Do I, if her dad's the only person that does it, then maybe that's his place in the family and so forth. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, as you said, different context, but with our families, there's like a very special context, isn't there? Because our initial context of our families is us being children, us being young, us being, especially if our parents kind of told what to do and being looked after. And as much as we evolve through our adulthood, when we go back to our family, there's some part of us, or a large part of us, that kind of slips straight back into that way of being.
Yeah, it's true. We always go back and remember our inhibitions or lack of freedom from back home. But I think life is like that. We create our own islands of freedom in between society norms. We can't always break the rules. Yeah.
And to start to finish up, I was wondering what's coming ahead for you. Like, are there any new themes that you are eager to bring into your work? How do you envisage your practice and your art evolving in the future? Do you have any thoughts on that, or is that a tightly kept secret?
No, I can talk about that because I was lucky to get a few opportunities to choreograph pieces with dancers in live events. And I had one opportunity to create a video with a colleague of mine, Omer, and videos are something that I do want to pursue. I want to be able to make my art not just for stills and send that to festivals and maybe represent, again, like tapping into the commercial world, maybe give something from the way I envision bodies to represent cultural institutions, but in the form of a video, not just stills. So maybe that in the future.
Beautiful. And I have one last question before we finish up.
Yeah.
If someone new was to come to your work, what do you want them to really receive? What transmissions you want them to be touched by observing and interacting with your work?
I think it depends on the environment where my frame is. I hope people will imagine that space in a different context and maybe in a different energy. we pass by a sidewalk, or we pass by a sign, or a window, and just rethink about those spaces we see every day, and maybe take that back home and think about those daily moments with our friends, with our family, with ourselves, and maybe see them in a different way. Maybe take a step back, relax a bit, breathe, and enjoy what we have. Because it's not about, that frame is not about that model. It's not about that specific space. It's about a space, a body in a moment. You know, it needs to be timeless, just about rethinking about how we choose to live in a much broader way.
Oh, lovely. I love that. Oh, man. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today on a topic that, I wouldn't say I'm at all an expert, and it's just lovely to learn about your process and what you've gone through and how you envision your future, but also the models and their experience of working with you. It's been really beautiful. I'm really, really grateful. And I imagine the listeners now are like, okay, where do I find this man's work? Where is he going to be exhibiting anywhere? How do I get involved in his work as well? Where can people find out kind of more about you and more about what you're up to?
My website is always updating. My Instagram is very active. Look for Omer Gaash, OmerGaash. It sounds like, oh my gosh. Yes, any way you can find me online, email, website, Instagram, I'm there. Get in touch. I usually update about upcoming photo shoots, if it's a group thing, or if I'm looking for a specific dancer, or I'm going to Spain at the beginning of May. If you're around, get in touch. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. And listeners, I really, really implore you to check out Omer's work. It will captivate you. I really have you, as he said, we think spaces and we think bodies and we think what our human bodies are capable of as well, in such strength and dexterity, but also great gentleness and kind of almost, well, often I see the intertwined images. I think of brotherhood, as we kind of touched on before. So really, I implore you to kind of head over and interact with his work as much as you can. It will benefit your soul in so many ways. And all that's left for me to say is thank you, listeners. Thank you, Omer. And ciao, ciao, until next week. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. Especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them. Share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.